They say family is supposed to lift you up. Mine. She laughed as I fell. Hi, I'm Sophie. I'm the youngest daughter. The underestimated one, the nice one. My sister Madison. She's the golden child. Brilliant, beautiful, and ruthless. The day she mocked me during a job interview right in front of a panel of strangers. It was the day I thought I had lost everything. What she didn't know was that the man she couldn't intimidate. The one who walked into the room next was my fiancé, the CEO. This is the story of how I stopped chasing approval and started building my own place at the table. I don't remember a time when Madison wasn't winning as kids. She was the star of every school play, the top of every class. The name whispered with admiration at every parent-teacher conference. Meanwhile, I was Sophie, the quiet one, the one who colored inside the lines, who turned in assignments on time, but never with fireworks. At home, Madison's trophies lined the mantel. Mine gathered dust on the bookshelf in my room. Participation ribbons, honorable mentions, certificates that faded under sunlight. At family dinners, my parents would beam at Madison's updates. Another promotion, another accolade, another global deal. And me, Sophie's freelancing. They'd say as if it were a hobby I'd eventually outgrow. The cracks deepened as we got older. Madison went to Stanford. I juggled 2 part-time jobs and a state school. Madison climbed the corporate ladder. I learned to code in between gigs, built small projects, and hoped one day they'd mean something. But Madison didn't just succeed. She took up space effortlessly. I remember once at a family holiday showing her a platform I had helped develop for nonprofits. I thought she'd be proud. Instead, she leaned in, smiled sweetly, and said, "That's cute, Sophie. But when are you going to do something real?" Her words stuck, wrapping around my ribs like a tight band. Still, I kept building, quietly, silently. What Madison didn't see was the girl in the background wasn't standing still. She was preparing. The glass tower loomed above me, its steel frame glinting in the morning sun. I tightened my grip on my resume folder, fingers pressing into the worn edges, and stepped through the revolving door. Inside, everything gleamed. Marble floors, chrome accents, sharp lines, and sharper looks. I could see my reflection in every surface, a reminder of how out of place I felt. I straightened my blazer, smoothed my hair, and whispered to myself, "You've got this in the waiting room." The other candidates were everything I wasn't. Polished, confident, laughing softly in their tailored suits. I took the only empty seat. Slightly off-center, slightly invisible, my name tag felt heavier than it should have, like it knew. Then the door opened. And there she was, Madison. Navy dress, heels clicking on the tile, a sleek leather folder in one hand, a mug in the other. That probably cost more than my shoes. She didn't flinch when our eyes met. No nod, no smirk, no sign. She even recognized me. She swept past, her perfume lingering like a signature. When she joined the interview panel, my breath caught. The one person who knew exactly how to unravel me was now sitting in judgment. The interviews began. Names were called. Smiles were exchanged. Notes were scribbled, then mine. I stood, legs trembling but masked behind a steady smile, and placed my resume on the table. Madison glanced at it 2 seconds tops, then slid it to Brandon, the smug executive at her side, as if it were a grocery list. No questions, no eye contact, nothing. I sat back down, heart pounding, cheeks burning. A low chuckle drifted from across the room. Someone muttered, "Didn't know she was even in tech." Madison leaned toward Ashley, her voice soft but sharp. "She still shops the clearance rack, huh?" Laugh was polite, but enough to make my stomach turn. I stared at the table, willing myself not to crumble. Not here, not now. But when Brandon finally turned to me, his grin wide, his voice dripping with mockery. "What makes you think you're ready for the big leagues?" I opened my mouth, ready to fight back, and then Madison reached across, snatched my resume and marked it with a fat red pen. Unqualified. I froze. The humiliation was surgical, precise. She'd done it before. In school, at home, even at family dinners, but never like this. Never with an audience. Never with my career hanging in the eye, swallowed hard, adjusted the folder on my lap, and heard my mother's voice echo in my mind. Don't ever beg for a seat at a table you're meant to build yourself. But as the laughter softened and the next candidate took the floor, a quiet truth settled in my chest. I wasn't here to beg. I was here to remember. The lobby felt colder on the way out. I walked past the reception desk, past the revolving doors, past the glossy walls that had witnessed my quiet unraveling. I didn't cry. I didn't break down on the sidewalk. I just kept walking, heart racing, thoughts spinning. Hands clutching that ruined resume like it was the last thread tethering me to anything real. A block away. I ducked into a small cafe, the kind with chipped mugs and a faint smell of burnt espresso. I slid into a corner booth, ordered a coffee I didn't want, and stared at the folder in my lap. Unqualified red ink bleeding through paper. It wasn't just a word, it was a verdict Madison had handed me. My whole life, my phone buzzed. A text from Liam. How did it go? My thumb hovered over the keyboard. It went exactly the way she wanted it to. But I paused, took a breath, and erased the words. Instead, I typed, fine. For the first time in years, I realized I didn't owe Madison my defeat. The chair scraped against the floor as I stood. My legs felt steadier, my breath slower. I left the coffee untouched and stepped back into the afternoon light. As I crossed the street, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Liam's voice. Where are you? I'm coming back, I said quietly. When I reached the building, the security guard blinked in surprise. I smiled softly. I'm here for the open assessment. Round. Upstairs, the panel froze when I walked in. Madison's eyes widened for a fraction of a second, before slipping back into that practiced icy smirk. Changed your mind, she purred. You never were good at letting go. I didn't reply. I pulled out the empty chair they hadn't offered me earlier, sat down and folded my hands on the table. Brandon leaned back, clearly amused. Well, since you're so eager, let's see if you can actually keep up. He signaled the assistant who dropped a thick packet in front of me. 15 minutes, 10 pages. No calculator, no laptop. Just a pen and a ticking clock. As the seconds slipped by, the room blurred. I heard the low murmur of voices, the scratch of Madison's pen, the occasional snort of amusement from Brandon. But none of it reached me, question by question. Line by line, I worked. When I finished, I slid the packet across the table. Brandon flipped through it lazily, then, smiling, tore it in half. The rip of the paper sounded louder than any insult. But I didn't flinch. As I knelt to gather the shredded pages, Madison's heel pinned the last piece under her chair. She leaned. Down voice a soft blade. Still crawling for approval, little sister. I looked up, and for the first time in years, I smiled. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and the air in the room shifted before anyone even saw him. Liam walked in, crisp black suit, no tie, Tom, as a man who didn't need to announce his authority. The panel stiffened. Brandon sat up a little. Straighter. Ashley's pen froze mid-scribble. Madison's smirk faltered, just slightly. Mr. Callahan. Brandon stammered, rising to his feet. We weren't expecting Liam, raised a hand, a quiet command for silence. His eyes swept the room, lingering on me for a heartbeat longer. Is there a reason Sophie's qualifications were overlooked? The color? Drained from Madison's face, we didn't know she was connected to you. Ashley offered nervously. Liam gave a slow, measured nod. Interesting, because you seem to know her well enough to dismiss her without review. He picked up the torn packet from the table, flipped through the shredded pieces, and let the silence stretch like a held breath. Madison found her voice. Liam. I can explain, no need, Liam said, his voice smooth, almost soft, but with an edge that sliced through the room. Sophie's already done that with her work. He laid a folder on the table, opening it to reveal project summaries, client reviews, and performance reports, all mine. 3 of our internal systems, Liam continued, carry Sophie's architecture. Her name's not on the front page, but her fingerprints are everywhere. Some of you have been using her frameworks without even knowing it. Brandon looked like he wanted to disappear. Ashley pressed her lips together, eyes darting to Madison, whose shoulders tightened as though bracing for impact. Furthermore, Liam added, flipping to another document. We've reviewed past application cycles. Someone flagged Sophie as unsuitable for company culture, using an internal login traceable to Madison. The room froze. Madison let out a sharp, breathless laugh. This is ridiculous. She's been riding my coattails for years. I stood for the first time. My voice was clear, steady, unshakable. No, Madison. You've been cutting me down for years. I just stopped standing in your shadow. Madison's mouth opened, but no words came. For once, the room wasn't hers. Liam turned to the board. Effective immediately, Sophie will be joining us as lead strategy consultant. Ashley raised her eyebrows, then nodded softly. Brandon muttered something that sounded like agreement. Madison's chair scraped against the floor as she stood. You're making a mistake, she hissed, eyes flashing with a desperate glint. No, I said quietly, meeting her gaze head on. I'm just done letting you write my story. As security arrived, the weight in the room lifted. Madison was escorted out. Her footsteps sharp and hurried. For the first time in my life, I watched her walk away without feeling small. The corner office was mine, not Madison's old office, no. I didn't want the skyline view, or the glass walls, or the plush leather chair. I asked for a desk near the development team where the real work happened, where the hum of creativity was louder than boardroom politics. I sat at my new workspace that afternoon, watching the sunlight spill across the floor. The faint smell of lemon cleaner lingering in the air. On the wall above my desk, I pinned the torn resume, red ink still faintly bleeding along the edge, not as a trophy, but as a reminder, it wasn't shame anymore. It was a receipt for every lesson I had paid for in silence. My phone buzzed. A text. From Mom. I didn't see everything before. Sorry. I stared at the screen for a long moment. My fingers hovered over the keys, but in the end, I set the phone down without replying. Not out of anger, just clarity. Some bridges weren't meant to burn, but they weren't meant to be rebuilt either. Later that evening, as I walked through the office, I saw her. The young woman from the hallway. The one I'd noticed weeks ago, clutching her resume like a shield. She turned when she saw me, eyes wide, nervous. They called me back, she said breathlessly. For the role you encouraged me to apply for. I smiled. Good. You deserve it. Her shoulders eased. Just slightly, as if those few words loosened the weight she'd been carrying. When I finally returned to my desk, I leaned back in my chair, the city glowing outside the window. The room filled with the quiet rustle of people building something that mattered. My phone buzzed again. Liam, this time, proud of you. Dinner tonight, I smiled to myself. Soft, private smile. I'd spent years trying to hold a place in a family that only reserved seats for applause. Now I didn't need their seat. I had built my own table. I reached into my bag and pulled out a scrap of paper. Something I'd scribbled on years ago, during a late-night brainstorming session. No one notices the quiet builder until the building outlasts the storm. I pinned it next to the resume, leaned back, and exhaled for the first time. The silence didn't feel like failure. It felt like peace. That night, I sat across from Liam at a small Italian place tucked away on a quiet street. It's a kind of place where the waiters know your name, and the light is soft enough to make even the toughest day feel gentler. We didn't talk much about the interview or Madison or the fallout. Instead, we laughed over shared plates of pasta, clinked glasses of wine, and let the tension of the past few days unravel at its own pace. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to just be. Not Sophie, the underestimated sister. Not Sophie, the one with something to prove. Just Sophie, who had fought her way through storms and was finally standing still long enough to breathe. A few days later, I went back to my parents' house. Not because they called me, and not because I wanted them to apologize, but because I wanted to sit in the living room where so many of my insecurities had taken shape and realized they no longer had power over me. Madison wasn't there. Her absence was a quiet, heavy thing that no one commented on, but everyone felt. My mother asked about work, about Liam, about the promotion. I answered lightly, without edge or bitterness. My father cleared his throat once, or twice, like he wanted to say something, but the words never came. That was okay. Not every story needs a tidy resolution. I left before dessert as I stepped outside. The night was cool, the sky clear. The streetlights casting a soft glow on the pavement. I realized, standing there, that the real victory hadn't been winning the job, or exposing Madison, or even proving myself to anyone in that boardroom. The real victory was in knowing I could walk away from a room, from a conversation, from a family dynamic. Without losing myself, back at the office, the days grew fuller. Meetings, projects, strategy sessions, all of it busy, all of it demanding, but none of it draining in the way those old battles with Madison had been. I found my rhythm among the hum of keyboards, the scribble of dry erase markers, the quiet determination of people working towards something meaningful. One afternoon, the young woman from the hallway, her name was Emma, popped her head into my office. "Hey, Sophie," she asked, hesitant. "Got a minute?" "Course," I said, smiling. She sat across from me, fidgeting with a pen. "I just wanted to say thanks for seeing me, for saying something when you didn't have to. I thought about all the times I'd wished someone, anyone, would have done the same for me. You earned your place here, Emma," I told her. I just helped hold the door open. After she left, I sat for a moment looking around the office, on the wall. Was that torn resume? The ink still faint but visible, and next to it the old scrap of paper I'd pinned up. No one notices the quiet builder until the building outlasts the storm. I smiled. I'd learned that success isn't loud, doesn't need applause or revenge or some perfect vindication scene. Success is the quiet choice to keep going, to build, to stop shrinking, to speak or not speak from a place of strength, not fear. Sometimes the people who hurt you won't say sorry. Sometimes the applause you waited for will never come. And sometimes the closure you think you need is really just permission you give yourself. As I walked home that night, Liam met me at the corner, his coat slung over one arm, that easy, knowing smile on his face. He pulled me in close, and for the first time in a long time, I realized I wasn't holding tension in my shoulders, wasn't waiting for the next battle, wasn't bracing for impact. I was just here, Sophie, whole, enough, and finally, free.